afternoon to this episode of Under the Hood, driven by detail. I'm joined today by our resident, I was going to say Keith Duffy.
Fuck off.
Keith Leyden from Keith Leyden Motors. We're also two very special guests today. We've worked very hard today. Keith had to pull a fast one to get my beautiful wife Debbie here on the panel. So Debbie's here with us today. Debbie works here with us at McKeown Auto Services. Sorry, Debbie doesn't work with us here at McKeown Auto Services. Debbie does all the work at McKeown Auto Services. And we're delighted to be joined by Ciaran Leyden from BG Products. Kieran, thanks so much for taking the time.
Welcome.
So we're probably best start off by introducing Debbie here. Debbie, you do pretty much everything here at McKeown Auto Services.
I do reception, parts, organising the work with the lads, accounts, emails, like from day to day, and then you do Facebook. So
Facebook.
yeah.
Well, I've been getting
PA
better
to
at
Sean. Yeah. It's a very busy job.
You should change that PA to SNA. Special needs
I won't
assistant.
say that, no.
For
You're
special,
not that bad.
for a special person. Kieran, a bit about yourself, Kieran. We know Kieran very well. Kieran has Kieran's kicking our door down for about 2 years solid, dropping off BG
Kieran, I feel
products.
really bad about that, by the way. How many times you were coming in here and I was doing cans on the shelf?
Yeah,
Here he comes
try
again.
Try this on. And in fairness to him, he was relentless. We'll give him that. And yeah, there was actually just one of the days we had an issue in this very corner with the car sitting at. And you know, people will wonder sometimes, how do we end up using BG products? Because we wouldn't use any additives. We didn't want to know. There's no point. But this Mercedes was sitting in a corner. It was a fairly special one. It was a CL63, I think, wasn't it? And as we're sitting here, we were doing work in the back end of the car, but we were starting the car every few days just to keep the battery right and things like that. Like this ticking noise came into the top of the engine. I goes, oh no, how are you going to tell the customer? Like, even though he knows we weren't at the front end of the car. So I rang him and said, look, a bit of a noise came into this just from starting and run it. But we have once tried this. I think it's hydraulic noise, which to me is oil starvation of some description. I'm going to try. I have this stuff here, knowing all the samples Kieran had left. I'm going to try it and see if it works. Pour the stuff in, it was DPO. 20 minutes later, noise gone. Kieran, we had dropped down a box and stuff, whatever it was. And so that was the start for us with BG. After 2 years of Kieran kicking the door in, trying to get in. And yeah, we've had a great partnership since. But going back, what's before BG? What's your history you're in the motor trade a long time?
Well, I wouldn't say the motor trade, but I would say I started off. My father was an oil man,
Right.
And I was born in Manchester, and he brought Gulf oil to Ireland back in 1978.
So it's his fault.
It's his fault, really. So I pretty much
The Manchester bit explains a lot too.
My kids hate me. But effectively, I grew up around oil. He was into the plastics business as well. But mainly oil is what we grew up as kids, because when he was in doing stock takes, we would have been in jumping on the forklift and jumping around in the barrels of oil, crashing the forklift on occasions and causing lots of trouble. But yeah, I pretty much grew up around it. And I guess I got involved when I finished college. I started off with my dad, but I didn't start when it was Gulf. He had that in 1978, but unfortunately, Gulf pretty much sold their business. They sold the business to Shell, and Shell were already in Ireland, and Gulf pretty much stopped overnight. Right. So he was left with a warehouse full of a brand that he had built up over years, and built up a lot of trust with that brand. And he had to find a new brand, which was a daunting task at the time. And that's when he approached a company called Texaco. And Texaco would have been a long-standing company in Ireland. And he approached them. They already had a lubricants business. Texaco wouldn't have really been in the automotive sector. They would have been very strong in industrial lubricants and commercial lubricants. But he approached Texaco to do a joint venture. And thankfully Texaco agreed. So it became the National Oil Company, which he was, became pretty much Gulf, which he still had to stock, but you had to sell out and obviously promote the new brand. But thankfully, Texaco was well known in Ireland. It wasn't a hard thing to turn people on from Gulf to Texaco. So he did that for a number of years, and that's when I joined. So at the time, this is showing my years, 15W40 would have been the main oil in the marketplace, even 20W50, but 15W40 would have been the main oil. And 15W40 went into cars, it went into trucks, it went into tractors, it went into everything.
It's time to go into it again.
Yeah.
There's a few sick engines there.
We won't talk about that. But
This is cured.
but at the time, I guess, when I joined, the country would have been on 1540, and you know, it was mainly a barrel business, and Dad pretty much got into the bulk side of the business. So installing bulk systems into garages to get them on bulk, loose product, there was less cost in it because of packaging and barrels and everything else. So when I joined, it was 1540, but the market in Europe and automotive sector had already moved to 1040. So you were trying to influence people to go from 1540 to 1040, and 1540 would have been a mineral oil. You're going into a semi-synthetic oil with a 10W40. And that was a task that was there. So I started off in warehousing, distribution, I did the trucking, and then I got into the sales element of things. So the way we had it was sales were down south, and it would have been heavily distributorized market. So the sales reps would have promoted the distributors to help the distributors sell. And that's pretty much how I got in. So I had a industrial side of it because Texaco were very strong in the industrial. So I got exposure to that side, commercial, agriculture, pretty much across all sectors really. And then Texaco then got taken over by another company called Chevron, and it became Chevron Texaco. And at that stage, my dad was bought out, and Texaco Chevron took full control of the business. But in 2010, 2011, they sold out their business to another company called Valero, and everything pretty much shut down. And that's when I stopped with the family business and moved on. Thankfully, there was a home for me in a parts supply company, Qualvicon. They owned the brand of Valvoline in Ireland, and they were the distributors. So I started with them and promoted that. And it, similar to the likes of Texaco, it was a little bit different. They didn't really deal direct with the customers. They dealt with the motor factors because they're involved with brake systems, clutches, and hard car parts, which typically in Ireland and historically, those companies never really went direct to the end user. They used motor factors to supply their products. And that was a big change because I struggled with that for a while. It was very difficult to actually sell in an area because a motor factor would go, this is my area and you need to supply them. But price was also a big issue because at this stage, you know, we're into, you know, 2000s, and I guess fighter brands had entered the market, and premium brands, you know, there was less and less premium brands, and there was all these fighter brands, and everybody became an oil distributor at this stage. So it was a very tough space to be involved.
So you think back in the 80s into the 90s, was there any, as you call it, fighter, I'm going to call them the cheaper brands, but you call them the fighter brands. Was it all premium brands back then, the 80s, 90s?
Pretty much, yeah.
What were the big ones?
The big ones are still the big ones globally. You'd have your Shell, you'd have your Castrol, you'd have your Mobil, you know, the likes of your Fuchs were still a big one. All of these companies, Total, huge company, all of these were your main top tier premium brands that were in the marketplace, and they were the options for people. It was Castrol or it was Shell. But I guess when the price came into it, and when the world got smaller and supply chains got smaller and distribution got easier, a lot of other spurious own brands started coming in, and the disparity in price was huge. You could buy a barrel for €1,000, and then all of a sudden you had a fighter brand at €500 that pretty much said it would do the same thing. And sure, naturally people want to buy on value, so they bought the cheaper brand. I guess back then, less problems were evident in the marketplace because we had different engines, we had different compressions, we had, you know, a lot less technology in the cars, and cars went forever. You know, you look at your old Transits, you put oil in it, it just went forever. Yeah,
Just keep topping it up.
yeah.
Or blowing out the exhaust or out the side of it.
Whereas I think now we're at a whole new level. But when I started doing oil, I guess, you know, approvals weren't really in people's heads. Approvals for the manufacturers were always there, but no one really sold on approvals. They pretty much sold on the brand that they had. But when the fighter brand started coming in, it was all then, well, how do we sell? It was based on approvals. Well, we have the approval and that one doesn't have the approval. And that's when, you know, that market kind of changed as well. And then now you have, my God, every week I see a different brand in the country. And that's not to say that it's not a good brand. There are a lot of independent lubricants that specialize in oil that we don't know of. But I guess the most important thing that I take out of it is if they have the paperwork, you know, that says, yeah, I'm 504, 507, which is the premium one that we would talk about.
But the problem with that is, and we spoke with this with Ciaran Gurney from, he's Castrol BP's technical guy, and he was here with us a couple of weeks ago doing a podcast. And one of the things he mentioned was it's so important to deal with a premium oil manufacturer for, and he gave us one example that I thought was really good. BMW Long Life 04. BMW Long Life 04, it's so-called 04 because it was announced 2004. 03 was 03. Oh yeah, LL02 was 02. There was no 05. But he says there's been 20 odd revisions of LL04. So if you're buying an oil that meets LL04, does it meet LL04 that was in 2004 in an E46 320D like the car you had? Or does it meet LL04 that's running in the 330Es nowadays? Do you get me? So you don't know. So that's why it's so important to work with someone or purchase oil from a premium supplier that actually is approved by, when you're approved by the manufacturer, you're going to be approved for the up-to-date approval. You're not going to meet a standard that was in 2004.
Yeah, and I think that there are levels, but I think for a lot of garages that are watching this, I think that, you know, everybody doesn't get up in the morning and go into work not to do the best to their ability. You know, they want to buy as best they can and supply. And the problem is that there are different qualities. You know, there's no denying that. You know, why is one, you know, €1,500 for a barrel and another one is €600 for a barrel? There are different qualities. And I think that as a standard, you know, having the paperwork and the approval to say, yes, well, Volkswagen have approved this, even if it was an older approval or whatever, Volkswagen have approved it. And people are not going to divvy out those approvals unless they've gone through the rigors of the testing and everything else. So I think as a standard, that's where you're at. Can you do better? Oil companies do much better. You know, there is a lot more that's in an oil than just having an approval. There is differentiations in quality from one 530, 504, 507 to another one that's 504, 507. 100% there's differences. And you generally know with how much you're paying for it as well. And I'm not saying that the most expensive is the best. There is marketing, but by and large, some of the big companies are big and they deal with the manufacturers directly for a reason, because of their R&D, because of their you know,
Just on that R&D, Simon mentioned that they can spend hundreds of thousands of euros between bench testing and road testing different oils of different engines, and he said, like, mid-flow of that test, it could all just go to bits, and then they'll have to start it again. Like, hundreds of thousands to get the approvals. It's not just running it through a strainer, like, you know?
It's massive, and this kind of works on to where I am now. But I remember when I was going for training with Texaco back in the day in Ghent in Belgium, and at the time they had Volvo engines and Scania engines running to destruction. So they were in a room, just the engine, and it was running to destruction. And they were testing every parameter of that oil, you know, and that R&D that you're talking about, you know, no different to the likes of Castrol or Shell, they put a huge amount into that. And I guess that's your sleep at night, you know. But as a standard, I think there are standards. And I don't think that people purposely get up in the morning not to buy a standard, because paper doesn't refuse ink. And sometimes it's knowledge. It's the likes of getting that information out to garages to say, well, you know, it meets, it can be used in, or it's approved by, you know, is having that understanding so that they understand. And every day, I guess, we're training and we're educating. And I guess to move on from the oil, when I finished with Qualvicom, my father-in-law, Pat, approached me, and I guess he needed help in what he was doing, and it was me getting back into a family business, which I always missed. And even though Qualvicom is a family
It
business,
was a family business on the other side of it.
yeah,
With my
but
wife's
it
family.
wasn't directly involved. So, you know, I managed, you know, he had an opportunity for me to start in that, which was a little bit different. It was getting out of the oil business, so to speak. And I started in BG over 11 years now. Time flies. But you know, when I started, it was funny. You know, BG have been in Ireland for over 25 years, and Pat has been the distributor. So the way that BG works, BG was established back in 1971, and it all started actually back in the 1930s. BG pretty much came out of the ashes of Winds, even though Winds is a big company, but Winds were the first real additive friction modifier type product that came out. And Winds back in the 1930s created this, and they started selling this through distributors in the States. And then kind of as it went on, it was became a family business, but the distributors that were there were selling it directly into the trade. But second generation of the Winds family came involved, and they saw a much bigger picture for the business. They said, oh no, hold on a second. We can sell this to the retail market, the Walmarts, the Kmarts and everything else. And we can have mass production, and we can really go after this market. So that kind of went against the distributors that were working with Winds at the time. And that's where the divide came, because
Probably just to stick into that, because I know this, to give people an example of where that becomes a problem. Because, you know, I mean, some people watching this might say, well, sure, it's not a great thing. It's not, because we saw this years ago. Remember, Keith, you just remember the tail end of it. The Pioneer radios that had the dolphins and the
I
race
don't
cars on
remember
them.
which one.
That's all right, yeah. Yeah, show them, yeah. John, do you remember them? Yeah, John remembers them. Yeah, we're all the old guys here. Back then, Pioneer were the premium product. They had digital sound processors that no matter how crap the sound system was in your car, you thought you had surround sound. And that was all right until someone in sales or accounts somewhere along in Europe decided, let's get into bed with Halfords. And Halfords dictated then, and to Pioneer saying, look, we can sell more of these based on getting they're too dear. Pioneer was always the most expensive product you could get, and because they were the most expensive product you get, they weren't a big mover for Halfords. They were a mover, but Halfords went back to Pioneer and said, no different than the fleet companies we're talking about with, you know what I mean, saying to dictating the long stairs and the vills. The likes of Halfords and other stockists dictated Pioneer and say, we can move far more stuff, but you need to make it cheaper. Pioneer says, yeah, we make it cheaper, all right, but we're going to take all the good stuff out because we can't make it for that. So what they've done is, for years, they sold off the fact they were Pioneer. But so instead of selling a smaller amount of them as premium products, they sold loads of them all of a sudden. Everyone wanted one. Even the last version of with the OLED screen that had the bright blue screen, the last version of that compared to the first one was rubbish, because they took all the bits that made the first one great out of it. Mind you, it went from 600 quid to 250 quid.
Yeah.
But the quality wasn't there. So be it wins, because I remember when we were over in BG last August, I done a bit of research for girls. I'm not going to go over here and not look them up before I go. But I could see that exactly what you're saying there. Distributors came together. They weren't happy with the direction that Winds were going. It's not that Winds were just started putting out bad stuff. They started being dictated by the market, if that made sense, similar to Pioneer. And even though they were capable of making a top quality product, distributors weren't happy. Like, this is not what we're used to selling. Let's go make our own. Am I right?
Yeah, well, they call it this. The 10 of the distributors for Wins came together, and 3 decided to stick with what they were doing, and 7 decided to become the founding fathers, so to speak, of BG. And that's when BG was set up with no product, no manufacturing, no distribution, no nothing. But they had a principle and an idea, and that was their idea, was that, you know, we're going to sell direct. Now, back then, testing of materials and everything else was a little bit grey. They did tractor pulling, and they did car racing as their testing, and that was the parameters that they went to. But you know, the R&D that we know now, that you spoke to Castrol about last week, and the R&D,
we've been in the Euro.
yeah, which is phenomenal. But
It's amazing.
that was the breaking point. So BG had to go and find a manufacturer. So they searched everywhere, and Southwest Oil and Gas, which was one of the biggest grease manufacturers in the world at the time, said, yeah, we'll make your products. So under the collaboration with BG, they started making the product. So BG had a product. And as that went on, I think that guy who owned Southwest, again, family business, he ended up dying. I think a tragic death. I think it was suicide. I think he had a medical diagnosis, and his sons took it over. And when his sons took it over, they didn't really want to get involved in this. So BG were at a loss again, but they ended up buying Withco, or a company along the lines of that, in Wichita, Kansas. And that's where BG started, in Kansas. And from there, they've developed, but with their mantra of R&D, manufacture, and how they can be the best products. And they've always strived from that point in 1971 to be the best product that they can. Now, as time has gone on, the distributors have gotten bigger. It's become global. They're China, Asia Pacific, Europe markets. They're everywhere in the world now. So it's all done through distributors, and it's all professionally sold, which is one of the questions we get given out to a lot, is why can't we buy your products in a motor factory? Well, one of the reasons, and we'll kind of discuss that as we go along, with where engine technology has gone, why we don't just throw product at broken. And unfortunately, that's what we come across every day of the week. So
It's one of the biggest things for me here as well. Most of the phone calls about BG, and then you're going through with them because if the problem's already there, you know, it's not used as that way, whereas we use it in every service. It's preventative maintenance.
yes,
But the customer doesn't realise that, and they just think, oh, I'll buy it. So you're so reluctant to sell it.
yeah, and and that's why we team up with professional garages, by and large, and that's, you know, that's been our philosophy as to where we've gotten. You know, it was a big change from being in the oil business, where it was you were selling on price. Now you're kind of selling on different. But it was funny, you don't really get the phone calls until I got into BG, and the phone was ringing all the time, because people would be ringing going, can you fix this, you know, with a can, and you know, liquid engineering, and you go, and funnily enough, how we got in here was through something that was, you know, showing problems. And it was only when you started working with the product. But when I started with BG,
My exact words at that point when I was pouring out stuff, then it's time to shine.
And it was like, have you got that? Have you got that fella's number in the phone?
Yeah,
there?"
where's that stuff he did? Yeah. But like you were saying, you've always dealt in back with your dad's business, 70s, 80s, 90s, into the 90s. You're always dealing with premium brands. And so, and I know myself, we've always, and Debbie, as long as you've known me, I've always harped on, like Debbie, back when I met Debbie, you know what I mean, Debbie was always into her cars, but not at the level I was into them. And I was always into the detail, the oils, that.
I just knew what I liked, what I wanted to drive.
Telling you, like, I knew it was good for it, right? And I'd hear a car drive past me in the street, and Debbie would go on next time, say, yes, that's what's wrong with that car. Debbie's looking, yes, so a lunatic here. But for me, dealing with premium, dealing with cheap was never an option, because every time we tried to bend to suit the customer. No different than Halfords and the fleets and companies and all that. They're trying to bend to a market to try and gain market share. To try to offer a more competitively priced product, but unfortunately through a competitively priced product, you're sacrificing quality. And it's always, anytime we try to, what we always help people out, because especially back in the recession where no one had any money, look, we'll try this. None of it worked. So we've gone full circle back, and we only entertain premium brands now. But for you leaving the likes of all the premium brand oils and now working with the premium product, it sat well with you, did it?
Yeah.
You went, did you feel it worked?
Honestly, when I started, I didn't know really how premium it was. It was a different market, because when I was selling the oils, oil was oil. Oil goes into a car. The technology hadn't moved on at that stage. Like, we're talking 10 years ago when I started. Like, we didn't 10 years ago have half as much as the trouble we're having now with newer engines. Newer technology has moved on. But when I went over to BG after the first year, and actually saw the company I was dealing with, that opened my eyes. That changed my whole perspective on who I was dealing with, the professional aspect, the R&D, the distribution, the ISO standards. Like, they are 5-1 over anybody else in North America. You know, of all the competitors, they're 5-1. They strive to be number one, and if it's not number one, they want to know why it's not number one. And that's,
There's accountability.
100%. And the way the market is going now, to have the level of, you know, manufacturer endorsements that we have, it's all going towards manufacturer endorsements. We recently just did the Ford agreement, where AC Delco, we deal with heavy duty with Hitachi. You know, there are numerous OEM endorsements now. And like Castrol spoke last week about their R&D and the level that goes into that, BG have to do the same. And they have to input people into these companies and work side by side with their R&D, because the likes of Ford and Motorcraft and all of these, they will have their own R&D team. BG have to work side by side, and they have to prove their ISO standards, prove the product, show what's going on. And when I became aware of the levels of R&D that went in, that sat well with me, because...
Yeah, I'd like to bring it back, because I want to kind of keep I want to get into the technical end of it, but not in this one. But I want to sort of keep sticking to Ciaran Leyden and what, you know, I mean, we could talk BG all day long, and we go into details, you know what I mean? And Debbie's right, so don't go into technical stuff for me. But what I know in the story, because myself and Debbie, we know you on a personal level, and I think a lot of the things that people don't understand is the effort that's put into, I mean, you're saying BG's in the country 20 odd years, you're in it 11 years, we're using it now, what, 3 or 4 years. You've been banging the door for 2 years before that. You're calling around, you're driving into the country, you're way early in the morning, you're back late in the evenings. We've been at things down with JP down in Cork. We've left at 11 or 12, 11 at night. A lot of people think I have it handy here. They don't see me sitting above in Belfast last night at 11 o'clock in a meeting, and at 11:30 back here in the dock collecting parts from people I asked to drop parts around the place, and then going up get paperwork. It was 12 o'clock last night for, you know, people don't, they say, I'm stuck with him, he's this and that, not only isn't it great. 12 o'clock last night, myself and the young lad got home and into the bed. You're the same yourself. So what's...
But I think, like Sean as well, what you're saying there, you have to remember the customer only sees you coming in your Jeep, dropping off the box of cans, and then you're going, you know, they don't see the effort behind all of that.
Yeah,
That's the easy part as such.
Look at, like, last year is a prime example. You know, I did over 100,000 kilometers. You know, it's a lot of driving, it's a lot of legwork. When I started, the east of the country, I suppose the Pale, the Dubs, you know, the built up areas, that's where we are based, and I guess that's where it was strongest. There was an American before me who was doing BG, and he worked at Forpat, and he had built up that area in Dublin. But outside of that area, there really wasn't very much BG. It was pretty much unknown countrywide.
I never heard of it, Kieran, until you
Yeah.
came in here.
Yeah, and a lot of the country didn't hear of it. You know, and that's where the hard leg work, the nights, the evenings, the early mornings, that's where that started, because you would go to an area like Longford or Donegal or Sligo or Mayo, no matter where you were.
Belmullet.
Belmullet, yeah, and thankfully we're covered in Belmullet. But you know, it's getting there. It's working an area to be time and cognizant of the time, and I've a young family and getting home to them and everything else. But to put in that legwork, the first 5 years, my wife didn't see me and kids, and thankfully they were young at that stage.
I think it's also a fair point to note that you're not just going around and delivering them, you know, like telling someone about the product. To be fair to you, when you come into me, like you spent the bones of a day there educating the service advisor, talking to the lads. There is backup on the phone as well. Like if we've been stuck with an issue, Kieran, what do you recommend?
building a relationship.
Yeah, in fairness, so it's not just this is a deadly product and there's a
Yeah.
load of boxes of it.
And you need that, like at the end of the day, or if you're away or Sean's away and I'm here with the lads and something happens, it's good to know there's someone that will answer the phone. There's nothing worse than being there and nobody's answering or no one to contact, you know.
We really hope you're enjoying these videos. We'd just like to take a couple of moments to thank Certa Ireland, who are the official country partner of Castor Oil in the island of Ireland, north and south. If you do want any products, please support Certa and give them a shout. They're really supporting us here on our podcast, and they're also supporting independent garages in Ireland like you. Do give them a shout if you want any Castor Oil. Back to the video.
Yeah, no, and I think even the bits that you went through with my service advisor, like that stuff works on how to sell it. Do you know what I mean? And it does.
And it's not even how to sell it either, it's understanding it, because they're the ones standing having the conversation with the customer. All the customer sees is they can.
yeah,
But the customer, never mind the customer, what your customer sees, your customer being the garages. And there again, you'll see that. You'll see young lads going into the trade, as soon as they finish their time, they're bolting out the door. I'm going out my own because I'm going to take on the world, and fair play to them. And I wish everyone the best. But with the biggest, we actually had a chat with a different mechanic yesterday who owns his own, done the same. He owns his own garage, and he said he had a lad coming working for him, and he built up enough money to buy enough equipment to build his own garage, and he only had his own garage weeks. He realised the cost. He realised the amount of hours he had to do to cover the cost before he actually made any money himself. Council came knocking, looking rates, a few other things, and all of a sudden then, within weeks, what he just opened had closed up because he didn't realise the dedication. Like, you know, I mean, Debbie will tell you the weeks that I've done 80 plus hours a week, and she hasn't seen me. Alana, when she was young, never saw me, unless she came in here or the
But
last
she was
garage.
here a lot.
Yeah, she used to come in and she'd dream, she'd go around and pot them in. But I think it's important to know, you know, that when people are dealing with, it doesn't matter who you're dealing with or what in what capacity. You're dealing with someone that's putting a lot of effort in, and that you're trying to build something up now.
do you know, I think starting off was the hardest part, and when you get that traction, I guess the initial sales call, like here, it's time consuming because it takes time and patience. But you know, in dealing with the garages and getting round and the initial first visit and leaving in the product, you know, whether it be a penetrating spray or whether it's an engine cleaner or an oil treatment or a gearbox treatment, you know, it doesn't matter, whatever that garage is into, you know, it was getting around the initial meet, dropping in the product, waiting for a problem to happen, whether it was gear problem or transmission problem, waiting for that problem, just like here, to happen, you know, so that they use the product and then go, oh my God, that stuff actually worked. You know, to getting the second call, it's time consuming. And a lot of people kind of ask, well, what is BG? You know, when you ask our customers, you know, what is BG to them, some of them are like, Kieran, we don't have turbo problems. You know, we don't have DPF problems. We don't have the same problems as another garage. And what you universally find in all of these garages is they have pride in their garage. They're generally clean workshops. You can see by the brands that they're buying, whether it's an oil, like when I go into a garage and I see a Castrol or a Shell or a premium top tier brand, I know they're conscientious. I know that, hey, they're spending extra on their oil because it means something to them. You know, when I drive into a garage and I see a rally car in the background, I go, this guy is into what he's doing because he loves cars, you know, you know.
He has the
And
selection.
but I think that that premium, I can work with that premium because that guy has a different mindset. When you go into a garage, and that's not saying that a dirty garage, you know, is a bad garage or they're not doing the same, but when you go into that clean environment, those guys are better able to talk to the customer. They're better able to discuss the problems that they're seeing. Like I've gone into garages where, you know, they're afraid to sell a wiper because the customer goes, I won't pay for that. You know, but
It's not a great customer base then.
and this is
If,
what we see.
if your wipers are hanging in your car, and you don't
The
want
problem is, you just discussed that guy who left the garage, saved up his hard-earned money, goes out to set up a garage, and then he closes. And
to weeks.
you know, I think part of that is what happens is they end up going cheaper. Whether, like, we all know brake pads, and I go into garages and I see every different type of brand. And you'll have one garage that's using a particular brake pad, and you know, you go into the next garage and they'll see that brake pad and they'll go, oh, I don't use that brake pad. It's useless. And they'll knock brands, you know, because that brand didn't work for them or that brand didn't work for them. And I think more and more what I'm starting to see is I'm starting to see garages like yourself going, hang on a second, I'm actually going OEM with what I'm doing because I've had too many problems with that car. And that's not knocking the independent sector or the independent parts. I think that there's levels. You can buy a brake pad which is down here and you can buy a brake pad which is up here. You're going to get different results. Is this one going to squeal? You know, is it going to wear out quicker?
We had a problem with a certain brand of brake pad there a couple of years ago. So it's the squealing, but it cost us as a business thousands. And this is going to lead on to the next thing I want to quick chat about is when you put your heart and soul into a business. You know what I mean? It really is. Myself and Debbie have 2 children. You know what I mean? The business, although Debbie calls me the third child, the business really is the third child. You know what I mean? Because it's what provides. Fair enough, yeah. The business wouldn't be the business without us, but it's still this what provides the life for our kids. The same way as, you know what I mean, your job provides for your family and your children. You give your heart and soul, and we all know people that they're just there for the job. They come in, they do their hours, they're gone home, and they're happy with that, and that's great because we need them people. You know what I mean, to come in and work for us. But there's also the lunatics like ourselves that 10 o'clock at night we're still talking about work. You know, we're still talking shop, and they think when you give your heart and soul to the business, and then all of a sudden someone starts giving you grief, then do you know what I mean? It's really get.
But I think the other side of that is, Sean, like using the OEM stuff and using BG, as you say, you can sleep at night knowing that you've done your very best on the car, and 99% of the time that car's not coming back. You know, we've BG on every service. Our own customers don't have DPF issues. All the DPF calls that I take are people that haven't been to us before. You know, so you can see it, and
They want a bit of what we have.
you don't have the squealy brakes, you don't have the brakes rattling around in the carrier, you know, they fit perfect. So for us, it's done once and it's gone, because as Sean says, when we did have problems trying the other brands, like, it cost us thousands.
Yeah,
We stand over
Like, the
everything.
fallback is on us personally because we don't have, you know, we're independent.
So I used to say, like, if there was the car damaged here, you know, I damaged the car myself. Last year we were doing work on the car, and I said to my car, you know, I was trying to do me, man. I said, is this car remapped? So I rang the guys in Avon, sure, in a particular car it was a 5 Series. And I says, listen, if I read this file and send it off to you, you tell me this thing's mapped. You know, says, oh mate, floor it, you know it's mapped. Right? And I'm like, all right. So I floored it. Now the problem that the modern 5 Series is, and all the Beamers now, you pull the bonnet handle once, it's first stage. There's no click under the bonnet for the second stage. It's a second pull of the handle. So I was out there, clicked the thing. For start, I didn't realise the bonnet was open. But I didn't actually realise the thing had been pulled twice. So I'm out in the yard here.
Didn't I tell you on the dash, no?
Or did you when I moved off, right? Why hadn't you and me that day? Yeah. Save me. So yeah, I said floored it. As I floored it, right, the car was definitely mapped because it took off like shit of a shovel. But floored it as the revs are coming up. Next time here's ding, you know, the dong, the BMW dong. And as I'm looking down to see what the dong noise is, which was bonnet open, as I was looking back up, here's the bonnet coming meeting the whole thing, right? And on the brakes, the bonnet had come up, right up, kissed the windscreen, right? Didn't have it, touched it, and come down, boom, bang. But it come up enough to kink the two corners of it. I had to go down and fix that, and an aluminium bonnet at BMW. Look, rang the customer. Look, I had to fuck up here. It's my fault, but I have to fix it for you, whatever. You're not going to get your car back today. It's a long and short of it. But I put my hand in my own pocket.
Yeah.
Fixed that. We had other guys here that damaged cars. No, not money, thank God. And they turn around and just look you, you know. And I'm like, no, I put my hand in my pocket. And this is Debbie said, as an independent, in same with you educate, you know.
But you take on with all that being self-employed. It's part of the job.
I know,
You
but
just get on with it,
people
you know?
don't realise what's all involved. Like, to make sure that car goes back to the customer in pristine condition, we are taking on with so much risk that a lot of people aren't prepared to take on with.
Yeah, well, I think people don't realise as well, and we'll get into this as well, like people don't realise what actually goes into a service, you know, and people think that, you know, service my car is the same level here as it is in another garage, as it is in another. They think a service is a service.
It's just an oil change.
It's, yeah. And I think that, you know, when you actually go into different garages, and even when you're talking about price, or you're listening to them trying to explain to the customer about different prices, the customer sometimes doesn't understand what a service is. And I think that when they see this €175 or €200 service on my car, that's the same as a garage that's doing it for 380. And why are they 380 and this one's 200? And this is kind of what we deal with on a daily basis, is how do garages present to a customer? How do they personalize the topic that the customer has, and, you know, and then present the solution to it? And, you know, when you look at the likes of, you know, automotive trainers in the market, I've had the pleasure of meeting the likes of Andy Sava, and listening to him. And I have to say, you know, I would be very much aligned in Andy's thinking. You know, it's, yes, he's clean. A clean garage works better than a dirty garage. It's pride. It's everything has a home, you know, it's front of house, it's comfortable. If a customer walks into a garage and they see a clean garage, do they have a different interpretation of what it is? Absolutely. They've got that kind of comfort to know that their car, and if their car is 10 years old, or, you know, it's a year old, it doesn't matter. That 10-year-old car could be the pride and joy of that family. It could be their only car, you know, and that means as much to the guy with the 1-year-old car. But when they bring that car into that garage and they're greeted with a smile at the desk, and clean and tidy and professionalism, that means the world. And they're the garages, I guess, that we've kind of managed to stick by. And that doesn't mean that we don't deal with a lots of other garages for different issues. But one of the things that we're starting to see, and it kind of comes back to the history, you know, where has it gone? And, you know, from the working 12, 13, 14, 15-hour days, you know, and getting around the country and seeing the different type of garages that are out there, you know, one of the things that you really do see is you get a snapshot of the person, the garage owner, their mentality. And they don't all need to be polished floors, you know, but there needs to be a mentality of pride and premium. And, you know, we get calls every day of the week by a new garage, and it'll be, that EPR, is it any good? You know, and you go, well, yeah, our customers seem to think so. But, you know, yeah, well, you know, I'm getting a lot of sludged engines here. I want to try it. And you go, whoa, hang on a second. Where are you based? Can I get to you? Is the first thing that I generally say to them is, I want to get down to that garage.
Yeah.
I want to get into that garage. I want to get a snapshot of what that garage is. And then I want to try and educate them, because people think I'm going to throw EPR at a sludged engine. No, like there's horses for courses. There's, you know, we can't fix everything in a can. I know that, you know, people say liquid engineering and, you know, the best, you know, it's another tool in my toolbox. And yeah, that's great. But it is an ally to a garage. Any garage that's generally working with us, like Debbie said, we don't have the DPFs, we don't have the EGRs, we don't have the sludge issues, and we don't have those problems. We might have different problems, but getting down to that garage to actually assess the garage and see what they're actually doing, because they'll throw EPR in that engine and something else will raise its head, and it's, sure, that EPR is shit, it blew up my engine. And we get that all the time because somebody's bought a can or whatever it might be, put it into a sludged engine, and you go, well, there's actually a different product for that. And have you checked this? And what do you know about the after treatment? Or is that mapped out of it? You're trying to assess, and you go into some garages and they constantly have this problem of sludge, or their customer base doesn't do what you tell them. You might go 15,000 kilometers on the dashboard or on the clock or on the reminder sticker, but how often do they come in at 15,000? Are they hitting 20,000? Or I completely forgotten, I didn't have time, and it's the only car in the family, and we went to 25,000. And then you get that garage and they're throwing EPR at that engine, and you're going, yeah, sometimes you can, but you got to be careful. You know,
You got to know when to use it, and when,
Yeah,
and more importantly, when not to.
100%. And there's different products for different things. You know, like I know that you know, I've been dealing with Keith for the last while as well, and the lads in there, and look, it's no reflection on a garage when they have to use heavy duty cleaners. It's more reflection on sometimes customers and what happens to their cars. And it's about knowing the right product and education into the product. So we have what's known as a dynamic engine clean, and you've used it.
We use them on a lot of the i10s because obviously we would buy them, you know. It's also good on the Peugeot 3 cylinders as well, and it actually has, like, I think that was the first product I think I called you on.
The dynamic,
The
yeah,
dynamic
yeah,
one,
yeah. It's a different type of product. It's an expensive service, and there's no getting away from that, but it saves engines. We shouldn't be selling the amount of dynamic that we are, but it's also a reflection on where technology.
What's in the roads.
Yeah, like the technology has changed, and without getting too technical on it, it's technology has changed, and I think front of house, and you know, from a product perspective and from a level of craftsmanship and work, something has to change, because where the manufacturers and the lease companies went with cars, like you guys know, by the time you get a car, more often than not, they might be in a 2-year warranty with a main dealer or a 3-year warranty. Some are as high as 5-year warranties. And sometimes what happens is that customer stays with the main dealer because they don't understand block exemption, that they can go to your garage and get their car serviced. So because of warranty and because of the salesman telling, now you have to come back here for a service.
There's a lot of service packs sold as well with this.
100%. This is a big part of it. You know, the car is sold to the customer, and it's 30,000 kilometer drainage full. Now, as an oil man, I don't care what oil you're using, whether it's the premium oil like Castrol or your Shells, you know, no oil can do what they're saying.
Not in these conditions.
And that's the primary concern.
Yeah, so Debbie, you know, you're our front of house here. You know, I'm
Yeah, so-
always floating around. So when we had a lot of customers coming in.
Floating around,
Will you-
sending love letters to Keith and JP and Laura and all the
That's
rest.
him ringing me. Right? So,
Don't answer, Sean.
right?
Ring him back later.
It's always important when Keith
Oh,
rings.
funny. Anyway, most of my calls, yeah, in relation to BG, I'm very reluctant to sell the can because, like you say, I'd be afraid they'd go and use it for the wrong reason or put it in the wrong part of the car. So I only sell it as part of a service here. So anyone else, I give your number directly for that reason.
So when you get the random calls at 12 o'clock at night, I want to fix my car.
You know, but that's
Debbie,
kind
give
of
him the
how I
number.
use it. It's used as a service.
And we agree with that. And one of the things that obviously with better garages, with better front of house, they can advise the customer. Like we've had calls whereby, you know, I put EPR into the fuel tank, or I put 245 into the engine oil. Like, people mix up all the time, and that's natural. But the better the garage you have, the better result you're going to get. And it's no different than using a premium brand of lubrication oil. When you use our products, you're going to get a higher result than if you're using a lower tier. And that's not ignoring the other end of the market. It's just we do tend to stick and to try and educate the customers as best we can. And I find that, you know, the more garages we get around to, some open their arms up and their minds and they go, well, yeah, this wasn't something in the past and we didn't have to do this in the past, but where we are now and the problems we're seeing, yeah, maybe I should be thinking. And it's about having a conversation with garages to say, well, yeah, there are different levels. You know, back to the likes of the OEM with their service packs. You know, by the time you get the car, Keith, and it's second hand and it's traded
There's
in,
100,000 kilometers on it. You know, it's not.
but it
It's
might
only been
only,
serviced twice.
it's only been serviced twice. You know, and this is the problem,
Full,
is that
full main dealer,
Service history.
full main dealer service history.
Yeah, but and
Yeah.
I look that up and I see 40,000 and then it's like, I'm like, where's the rest?
Yeah.
Jesus.
But you know, when you're trying then and you're throwing your hand at that car, and you know that the average age of a car in Ireland is roughly 10 years of age, and it's gone through 4 years of hardship or 3 years of hardship with long drain servicing, because, you know, just circle back on, you know, they make an oil to 30,000 kilometers. If you look at the specification sheet, or the oil data sheet on that, there will be a number of disclaimers in that sheet where it will be, can be used up to 30,000 kilometers under normal driving conditions. And
Ideal,
then,
yeah, ideal conditions more. Yeah, they call it
yes.
normal, but they mean ideal.
But when you look at what is, and this is one of the things that we're constantly on a daily basis trying to get across to people, but what's normal and what's severe? You know, it's the complete opposite to what people think. You know, severe is, you know, going to collect the kids and drop the kids to school
Stop,
and going
start,
for this
stop. I know.
start driving.
Work, school,
Yeah,
work, school,
driving in a
home.
city environment, starting your car and actually not driving over, you know, 8 to 10 miles is severe driving.
And most customers will say to you, no, I don't do a lot around because they think it's a good thing.
Yes.
You know, that they're only around town
It's the
driving.
worst thing they can do.
But
for
they've
them,
been probably missold the car for
Yeah,
the driving
and,
they're doing.
you know, and this comes back to
Dodgy
the
salesman.
to the guys. But you'll probably find, Keith, in Dublin, what's selling for you in Dublin is probably nice, neat little petrols, 3-cylinder petrol.
I try and steer away from most of the diesel stuff, to be honest. Like, we'd have a go at IX35s, the odd Qashqai, or, you know, a Jeep kind of SUV, because we would have a call for that, but only if, you know, I would prefer to just have all small petrols.
But you would obviously have the conversation with the customers of what kind of driving they're doing.
Yeah, we've mentioned
Yeah.
that on a podcast before as well. It's just, it's qualifying the customer, and there's no point in selling them a diesel car if they're going to be driving.
But sometimes they're not asked them questions when they're going in buying a new car, or
Yeah,
you know, they're just
sell it
buying
to them,
because they
but,
like it.
yeah.
Or
But all it ends up doing is, particularly because we're selling used cars, it'll end up smashing my head in, smashing the customer's head in, and everyone. It's just an argument then at the end. So just do it right from the start.
But on that, I'm going to wrap this podcast up. But a small story on, again, qualifying the customer and selling the right product and where not to sell. And customer come in here one day, I think Lara, Debbie's sister, was here, working here last year, and customer walks into the office. I'm upstairs, hiding probably. So Lara comes up, says, "There's a customer downstairs here, BMW and Drogheda sent him up." And I goes, "Huh?" BMW and Drogheda didn't send them up. There's no way they let someone out the door, you know, unless they're winding us up. So that was right, so I'm down here. So I'm down here and see this, and there's a gentleman downstairs with 2006 or 7. It was an E90, it was a 3 Series, right, 320. And he had a problem with the car leaking oil. And you know, he's only after coming from BMW because they decided to go up there and have a chat with John. So I'm sure he told him the same story. But what happened was,
After taking 1,500 on, we don't do that.
no, in fairness to them, they didn't even let him pass the service desk. God, whoever was at the service desk in BMW and Drogheda just goes, "Do you know what you do? You go up there and talk to Ciaran McKeown there." In fact, you know, I mean, they didn't take anything of him. But he comes in, so he told me the same story. He says, my 320D, I love my car. It had a problem with burning oil. All right, okay. And is it still doing that? No, I fixed that. Right, how'd you fix that? You know the Lucas additive? And I goes, yeah, the one we all know from the wee wheels you see in the motor factory, yeah. the tar, as we call it in the bottle. Yeah, so he put one of them in, right? And the car was still burning oil. So then he put a second one in, and it just didn't burn just as much oil, right? They're quite a big cans.
Oh, because
Right.
running on
Right,
grease.
yeah. So hang on, right?
No oil in it to burn.
Right. So, but I says, but right, so how'd you cure it? I put a third can in, right? So he's 3 cans of Lucas, right? Tar, like heavy oil.
Stabilizer, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right? 3 of them in it. And he says, right, so it doesn't burn oil anymore. No, no boil on oil anymore. Right, okay. There's no oil to burn. But anyway, what's the problem now? Overheating. Right? So his engine's screaming. It's about to explode. Right? Because the pistons are having such a hard job getting up and down. The lubrication's no longer there because it's thick with this other stuff. And I'm not knocking that product. I'm just saying there's a
Yeah, no,
fine
there's a
example
use for it. You
of
don't
it
put 3
used
cans in.
completely
You know.
wrong. So what's happened now is he's in here saying to me, you have the stuff there, and he's pointing at the cans of EPR, and I want to buy this. No, no, because what's going to happen there, his engine's about to explode, right? It could explode when you push the start button. It could explode on his way home, wherever he's going to. And if whatever's the last thing to go into that engine is the thing that's going to get the blame. It's the since you touched my car mentality, right? So he's like, I want to buy it. I said, no. I said, listen, it's a good chance your engine is gone. But if you want us to try it, what we'll do, it's going to cost you €1,000. First of all, we'll try and drop whatever's in out of it.
Take the sump off and scrape it out.
Oh, yeah, just shake it. It'd be like jelly, right? We'll take that out. We'll put a fresh oil in it, and we'll run oil on its own and see what that does. And if that doesn't blow up, then we'll try come in with an EPR. We'll clean the oil down. That'll help. We can do a dynamic engine flush, try and clean the rings. We're going to this, and we can do it step by step by step. But first, we need to make sure your engine isn't at a point where it's dead anyway. No, he was adamant. This was he.
The hairs on the back of my neck are
he
standing
wasn't-
up here.
He's got the shakes
I
from it.
couldn't even get you. Why would you even get involved?
I don't know.
You
This
know,
is
you
what he
have
says.
to
If you
just-
want me to do it, I'm going to step by step. But you have to, before we even start, your engine could be gone already. Once you know that. No, he was going to put a flush in anyway. So all I could do is tell him, you know what, go to a motor factors and go in and try something. Now, we've never heard of him again, but the point I'm making is
He's
that
on the M1 waiting on a recovery truck.
I don't know what happened. It was that Lucas stuff, and you know what I mean. It wasn't. It was the fella pouring in. But see the way we saved you that. We saved you that one. But it's a fine example of why training is so important with putting things in, and it doesn't matter if it's additives, oils, whatever it may be. You know, I mean, Debbie will often turn around, and it's not, and it's also important. You'll have garages will have just front of house, literally plonk someone into a job with no knowledge of cars whatsoever. People don't realise that Debbie's working here with me over 10 years now. And that's a lot of knowledge gained over them. There's a lot of time Debbie will turn around, and Debbie's a great one of Debbie's jobs that you do it very good at that you didn't mention at the start is Debbie's probably of all the filters
Premium yapper.
No,
I get no work done talking all day.
yeah. Of all filters we have here and upstairs and DPF filters we talk about, Debbie's probably the biggest filter in this place because the amount of stuff that people ring up and Debbie's you'd be in the office saying Debbie for hello, McKeown all the services. The next thing, you what?
Every day's a school day. School day, huh? You never know what you're going to hear, but it's like we are very lucky too. Like in all the years we're together from doing the thing right, most of our customers have been with us from the farmyard
Yeah.
and have never left, you know, and they don't have trouble as such with their cars other than servicing brakes, timing belts. You know, we're lucky in that
That's
way.
maintenance, you know, that's not
That's
not
what I'm
problems.
saying, but most of the customers are, like 95% of our customers are with us that long.
Yeah.
Like
Which
I
is
know
really
you
good.
need to wrap up on it, but that's it. Like it's funny getting around the country and seeing second and third generation garages, and there's a lot of them out there. And what we see is the first generation started a trend of quality and everything else, and the second generation took that on. They've been servicing the same families and the same relations in a remote area, and we could be talking the likes of Dromore, West and Sligo, where everybody knows everybody and they do the servicing in that area. They don't have problems. They don't have the same problems that, say, down the road where you're into Ballina or into Castlebar. They don't have the same problems as you know, the likes of other ones, because there's a trust element in these garages whereby when the car comes in, the customers are told this is the way that we do it. Half the time when you're standing there watching what's going on, it's there's the keys, give me a call when it's done. And it doesn't matter what needs to happen to the car. The trust is there because it's, sure, Paddy was the dad, you know, Peter's the son, you know, and the grandsons are even involved now, whereby that trust is still there and they don't have the problem.
And I think it's important to have that relationship as well, that if something does go wrong, they're not afraid to come back to you. Like Facebook obviously is very big for Sean, and it's great in some ways. In other ways, Facebook, you know, people can very quickly go on there and put a rant and it's damaging to your business. Most of our customers, I think, if they had an issue, they would come back. But like only this week on a local page, I was in college the other night and I seen a notification coming up on the phone, all garage was meant, and I thought, oh, here we go, because this particular page runs, you see all the time, not happy with my hair, my hairdresser done this, go back and tell her. But instead they're ranting about it and going somewhere else. Anyway, the thing came up and I'm trying to text him to go, Sean, I just seen this, you know, I'm in college, can you look into it or whatever?
So I can't look at it.
Sweating.
Yeah,
And
I can't
went
look at
on
it
anyway,
because
and there
it's
was 16
female-only
comments
page.
underneath it, and there wasn't one, you know, there wasn't one negative comment, which is very rare. So
There's a couple of people said they're very expensive but very good.
yeah,
And your name was mentioned a few times, and we are delighted because this particular page, it's a female only page, and Debbie said it's generally people come on to give out about an experience they had. Do you know what I mean? And if your business is named on, we've seen other garages named on it. We've seen local dealers being named it. Slated, ripped apart. And when someone sends you a message in, you made this page, you're like, oh. Right, and I can't get onto it because I'm not a woman. So next thing, Debbie turned around, I said, you see, Debbie can't look like she's in college. She's sweating for half an hour going, what do we do now? And next thing, all of a sudden, Debbie goes onto it and it's like, oh, jeez, that's nice. That's nice. Very good. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Great mechanics. Expensive, but good. And I turn around and say, you know what? Like, of all the giving out we do with Google reviews and things like that,
yeah, Google reviews, another,
it's
yeah.
not bad. But to go on to that, like I said to Debbie, do you know what? That's actually lovely to see that there's so many people. And Dundalk, in fairness to us, has always been very good to us. The people in Dundalk have been very good to us. The town has been good to us. The suppliers have been good to us. You mean, we're very lucky in this town. And it was lovely to see that all these people come in on a page that you would normally be going, oh, jeez, you know, like, what they say about me? Bump, bump, bump.
He was statement, if you don't, as you said earlier, if I don't know about it, I can't fix it.
Yeah, you know, and I
say that
I'm
to all my
happy if I
customers.
know that if something does go wrong, that they will come back and they can pick up the phone, they're going to get either me or Sean. Unless it's a half day on a Friday. No. But if it's urgent, people will always get you, you know. We're never far away, but it's good.
Look, we'll wrap up on that. Again, Debbie, thanks so much for coming in today to join us, and hopefully we'll get you in here. Hopefully we'll get you here for another few podcasts. Kieran, thanks. We'll sit on for another while, will you? We'll try and get brilliant. And Keith, thanks for coming up today. I know you didn't want to answer the phone me this morning, but anyway, okay, we
That
are.
was brilliant.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. What's the
He's
pal?
delighted with that. He's been laughing all
delighted.
day. Sean's sweating.
Keith wouldn't answer the phone this morning at 7:30.
It's not that I wouldn't answer the phone. The phone went dead and it wouldn't turn back on. And
Well,
when
it
it
rang.
did turn back on, I couldn't open the screen. John and Kieran were witness to that. And for that note, I was here before everyone else. So, on that note.
The stress, right? You think the garage is causing me stress. You know, the podcast causing even more. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching this. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.